Hello everybody, I'm Donnie of D3VFX, and this is my final video of my four-part series where I am talking about my process on how I made this environment, and this is going to be my render tips and tricks videos. My goal here is to give you as much useful information as possible without bogging you down with all the basic or extra information that you might not need. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open up my render queue settings that I've saved. In this particular instance, I ran into an issue with grass maps where every time I went to render, Unreal basically tried to generate all of the grass at once in render and then caused it to crash not even one frame in. So my workaround for that I found online, and Brushify also has a little bit of documentation that talks about this, as I am using the Brushify plugin. If you disable flush grass streaming, you see here false, it solves that issue. It basically means you just need to add a whole bunch more warm-up frames to allow those grass maps to generate more slowly and show up in your renders. Otherwise, say you have a 200 frame camera move, frames 1 through 90 might not have any grass, and then all of a sudden your grass populates. So you'll just have to add some warm-up frames to compensate, which I was rendering PNGs just for my tests, but I do recommend EXRs or a different higher quality image type. There we go, and we're back. Sorry about that, y'all. Had a quick autosave pop up. Now, I went ahead and added quite a few engine warm-up frames. This is an older version of my file, so it does not quite have everything that I added. I did, however, put around 1,500 engine warm-up frames, which I know is a little bit intense, but ultimately it allowed me to get all of my grass maps generated and have everything in the render that I wanted. I did run into some issues with the leaves of my foliage disappearing when I disabled the flush grass streaming. I could not quite figure those out. I would have done some additional troubleshooting and had a solution for you, but I then had an issue with my file no longer opening the next day when I tried to use it on my computer. It would open on other computers, but I then lost access to the academic hall that I would have been working in due to the summer quarter ending. So for now, this is the best I have. I will be uploading written documentation on my website, linked below, that will talk about what solutions I found for this problem once I have access to an academic hall again in a couple weeks. So, that aside, console variables. This is going to be the big thing. Anti-aliasing samples, I put my spatial at 2, temporal at 16. This was just for the purpose of doing test renders and everything. I might increase these a little bit more when I'm actually rendering my final piece. Same thing with screen percentage here, which if you don't know what screen percentage does, it basically renders, like say you're rendering, a 1090 or 1080 by 1920 image at 1K resolution, then instead it'll render out like, in this case I'm doubling it, so it'll render like a 2K image and then shrink that back down into a 1K image. So it'll take you longer to render, but it will give you crisper details and less noise in your final render. So, this is always a nice quick way to get better results without having to dial in a whole bunch of other things. Many of these console variables and such came from the likes of William Foucher and Clinton Jones on the Punisher YouTube channel. I'll be sure to link those down below. But yeah, that was sort of the baseline that I worked with in my projects, and then I added in from there the stuff that I needed and modified some of the ones that they provided. But for now, I'm just going to kind of go down this list real quick. I'm going to skip over some of the more easy ones to understand, like, for example, bloom quality. It's pretty easy, just the quality of the bloom. Depth of field quality, same thing, motion blur, etc. So I'm going to go down to the ray tracing shadow samples per pixel. So the goal of this is basically help denoise our shadows a bit, give us crisper shadows. In this case, it's at 64. I could probably decrease this because in my scene, I have a lot of wide shots. I'm not, it's very well lit. It's an outdoor scene. I don't have a ton of shadows to worry about. So that was something, I could probably dial in a little bit more if I was worried about it. This is going to be helpful for darker scenes, especially disabling the shadow denoiser. Part of that is like, oh, my shadows will be more noisy. Not exactly. It depends, but from what I've found, this can help you render quicker. So, if you're test rendering, this is nice. Also, it can help keep out any weird, unwanted noise or loss of detail in your shadow areas that the denoiser can cause itself. Um, there are other ways of denoising your images or layering in actual like film grain or stuff like that, which will kind of affect it anyway. That's two things I have not added in mine that maybe it'd be good to add would be chromatic aberration and film grain. But yeah, to move on from there, the two that I really want to talk about are the foliage LOD distance scale and the grass call distance scale. Again, all of this is also written on my website in the description, but the foliage distance scale, I have it set at 10. Let me show you what this does in engine versus in render here. So I'm going to minimize that. So you can see, as I get closer, the LED switches, they have a different material. They show up a little bit differently. So maybe I'm moving my camera in my render, and I don't want them to pop in like this, Also, for the purpose of a render, we're not worrying about having a whole bunch of things at a very high level of detail. It's, the purpose of this is not to be used for a game, so we're not optimizing this for a game. Now, distance scale, and I'll set it to 10 just like I have in my render settings there. Boom. It's going to change the distance at which you see your highest level of detail. So you can see here in the back, we have some that are at that higher level of detail. Well, higher level detail number, like LOD 1 or 2, etc. But yeah, so that's the way that I'm controlling that. If I have my camera here, I want all of my visible trees in the foreground to be nice and easy, and the ones further away, I'm not as worried about. So that's the purpose of that. Now, let me go to a little bit of a flatter area to show you this. Yeah, so you can see we have this weird clipping with the grass. Let me switch back to selection just so you can see everything better. So yeah, we have this weird edge with the grass that I don't like. So, to fix that, we're going to use grass cold distance scale. Now, I do want to specify that this is going to be used specifically for grass maps, not for grass that you put on your landscape via the foliage menu. So again, if I go to the foliage menu, I have some grass loaded in here. If I went and placed this grass via this foliage menu, it is not going to be affected by that console command. Or console variable, rather. So, yeah, so there's some of that grass in there. So that's just something to keep in mind. But this is useful for, getting rid of those weird edges and, only keeping the grass visible that I want to be seeing in camera. You can see how much it's affecting our performance. So, it can get kind of intense kind of quick. And partly why I have so many engine warm-up frames is because of this grass. I want to give it time to generate. Again, we have disabled the cache flushing. So we need to give the engine enough time to catch up and generate all this for our renders. But yeah, that's the main purpose of that. If you have any questions over any of these, feel free to reach out to me in the comments of this video or on my website. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'm going to show you the final product of this environment now. So, thank you. Hey everybody, just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and this is currently one of my temporary renders that, like I was mentioning earlier in this video, I will be re-rendering this project and updating my documentation on my website, so be sure to check those out. They should be up in the next 2 to 3 weeks or so, but yeah, I'm looking forward to finalizing this environment. And again, thank you so much.